Hi, and welcome to the Loan Officer Team Training. Today, I have a very special guest, a very special friend. Her name is Toni Taylor, and she's in Florida. She's an originator. She's a coach with the Freedom Club, the Mortgage Marketing Animals Freedom Club, and she is a mom and a wife and all kinds of things that you've got on your plate, right?
I do. Hi, Irene. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to have you here today. And I'm
You
so
for
grateful
having
that
me.
you took time out of your busy schedule to be on this podcast today, to give us some value, to talk to us about what has worked for you, what you're working on now, and just those types of things. And so it's going to be fun. I'm
Yeah,
looking
no, I
forward
love
to
it. I love it. This is a great, no, I appreciate it. I'll hang out with you anytime I get the chance. So
Yeah,
this is
I really enjoy it, having our
a treat.
conversation. So it's really just a conversation and talking about. So tell us about how you got in the mortgage business and how long you've been in the mortgage business and whether
Okay.
you're a broker. I know what you are, but tell us.
Yeah, so I'm a broker. I got into the business back in 1990. It's a kind of a crazy story, but I was 19 years old. I moved from Michigan to Florida. I was waiting tables, and I had a circumstance that left me into a financial crisis, and I ended up being led to a financial company that helped me out of my financial crisis, and then also offered me a job. And at that company, we did consumer loans, we did mortgages, we did home equity lines of credit, basically kind of everything. So I started in lending, and it was for the seasoned listeners out there, it was a finance company. It was a consumer finance company. I don't even know that they exist anymore, but it was an amazing training ground. So I spent 7 years, worked my way up very quickly. I was actually one of the youngest people to ever take on management in that company. They didn't, back then, they wouldn't allow you to promote without a college degree, and I didn't have one. I still don't.
I don't either.
Yep, but I was tenacious and stubborn, and I was determined, and so I scrapped and clawed and kept fighting and demanding and kept working hard and showing up, and eventually worked my way through. And then I went into wholesale. I left that environment 7 years later, went into wholesale mortgages, and then ended up through that evolution actually opened up from the ground up a small boutique wholesale company, and then ran that until the financial crisis in 2008. We closed up the doors on that, and then I got back into the retail channels, worked for some lenders, kind of bounced around back then from the broker to the lending, and hung out in the lending space for a little bit. And then I became a broker again back in, I think it was 13. Went back over to the broker space, and I've been a broker since then. So it's been a great ride.
That's great. And you own your own company.
I
And how many
do.
people do you have working there?
Yeah. So right now I have 4 loan originators, and I have 4 support people inside, virtual assistant, and I use contract processors.
Okay. And do the loan partners that you have, do they support all of the loan officers or
They
just
do.
your business, or how does that work?
No, they support everybody. So, and we don't, like, I know there's different ways of friends and people in the group that run it from a pod standpoint where people have a designated person, but kind of the same. We've approached it with the same concept that, well, if I have one loan partner that's assigned to me and they're not available, then people are now waiting, right? So we decided that instead of doing it that way, that we would work it to where it's kind of a round robin. And that also gives, no matter who the originator is, the truth is not everybody gels with everybody, whether it's the originator gelling with somebody on the team, or whether it's a business partner gelling, or even a customer gelling with somebody on the team. So by having us, have access to everybody on the team, anybody can call up and say, hey, this client's not feeling it with this loan partner, or this realtor's not feeling it with this loan partner. Can we reassign them to somebody else? And we have that flexibility to do that. So it's worked out really well. And then we don't have the issue of, somebody's on vacation, or somebody's just on the phone with another client and somebody having to wait, because the phones are set up to run where they'll round robin until somebody grabs that call.
That's
So
great.
it works pretty well.
Yeah, I really like the round robin thing, because then you can tell everyone's getting an equal amount of leads. It's kind of being distributed through everybody. And as long as everybody's doing it the same way every time, like you don't have one loan officer that wants it this way and another loan officer that wants it that way. Tell us how you work that. Because a lot of times the loan officers, they all want different things from the loan partner. So how do you handle that?
Yeah, so that's interesting. There is always a little bit of a difference, but for the most part, you have to create some standards. Otherwise, it disrupts your organization. So if you can't And I think that, one of the risks is if you have somebody come in that's a really high producer, then people think, oh, I have to modify to accommodate them. But, it's almost more important that you don't in that situation, because the more consistent things are, then the better they work. If you start doing things out of sequence, then it will mess up the experience for everybody involved. So it doesn't matter who it is. And communication's everything. I think that, the other piece is that everybody that works here is remote. So we don't sit in the same office. We're not down the hall. I have people in Michigan, Wisconsin, around Florida. I've had people in, Puerto Rico before, other parts of the state or the United States. And so we don't have that luxury of walking down the hall and having a conversation. So communication is super important. My team, I tell them all the time, whatever you cannot have anything stored in your head or on your desk. It's worthless to the rest of the organization if it's in those two spaces. It has to be in the systems. So that it has to get out of your head and has to get into the system. And do not make your team rediscover things you've already discovered.
Yes.
So that's just a discipline. It's look, some people have had to learn it. Some people it comes naturally to. And we've had some salespeople that we've just decided, what, it just doesn't gel. It's not the right fit for the team, and we can't disrupt everything for one person.
Mm-hmm.
It works the way that we do it. Our reputation is really strong. We're really proud of that. And we want to replicate that. So we look at it and the kind of the attitude or the approach is that what we're doing, we know is working really well. Mm-hmm. So to have somebody come in and think that we can ever flow it differently, it just jeopardizes everything. Yeah. Right. And not to say we're not open. If somebody sees a way that we can improve or refine something, I want to hear that. They're outside.
Oh, absolutely.
Valuable for sure. But it can't be, I'm a high producer, so you have to modify everything to please me. It has to be because it makes sense for the whole organization.
Yes.
To make it better for everybody involved.
Yeah. And as coaches, I'm sure you've seen, as well as me over the years, people that have teams and, they have a loan partner that supports them, and one loan officer wants it one way, one wants it another way. And it just doesn't work that way. If you're going to be sharing loan partners, there needs to be sweat the same way every time. And part of that, like you said, especially with virtual people, not just especially with virtual people, but I think that has opened up our eyes even more, having virtual employees, that you do have to have a system where everything is written in there. You have notes that you take so that if Susie is out, Joe can take over seamlessly with no problem. So that's part of having a system. And
I always say it's got to be done if you were to be hit by a bus, right? And last year, we had some things happen in our organization. I had one of my employees lives in Cape Coral, and he was hit by Hurricane Ian. Now, granted, we have a couple of days leading up to that, but the truth is you can't go through all the files and, think that you can remember everything because you didn't do a good job. You have to do it as it's happening. Yes. And then on top of that, literally days later, I was in the hospital having a surgery that I didn't plan on. 2 months later, he was in the hospital having some health emergencies that were completely not planned for. Had we not done what we had done, it would have been very easy for balls to be dropped. But because we are so disciplined about doing that, the team is actually able to pick up and know exactly where they left off and not have anxiety or jeopardize the experience for our partners and our loan officers and the clients. It really was just kind of business as usual, and nobody really experienced any impact of somebody being down for whatever time they were affected because of the circumstances.
Imagine how that would have gone had they not had notes in a system where everybody had the ability to get in it. And let me ask you this, when you have your team meetings, do you get on Zoom where you can see each other, or do you just get on the phone with each other? How does that work for your team meetings?
We live on Teams, the Microsoft Office Teams. We live on that a lot, and we chat with each other on that. We call each other on that, and I want to see their faces. I'm like, look, it's the only way we can be connected, especially because we're spread out. I want to know who you are. I want to feel like I want us to have as much of a human interaction as we possibly can, even though we're not sitting next to one another.
Mm-hmm.
So we are on that all day long. It's funny. I was thinking about it this morning and I thought it's a little quiet. Today's Martin Luther King, right? So a lot of companies are closed. My office is technically closed, but I've been working today. And I thought, it's a little quiet. And that I was thinking the Teams chat's a little quiet. And I'm like, we might be a little loud on that. We might need to quiet that down a little bit so people can have some more focus time, because it can get a little bit out of hand, but
it can.
Yeah, it can. So I think that it made me aware today that, I'm getting a lot done because I don't have all of this kind of chiming in the background.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, but yeah, I think the video is really important.
I think so too, because it helps you connect. If you can't connect in person, it's almost like in person, right? It's just not, you can't touch each other, but you can see each other, and it makes a big difference, because you can't develop a relationship the same way over a phone that you can when you're seeing each other. When I first started coaching 10 years ago in the Freedom Club, we didn't have Zoom or Teams or any of that stuff that we used. I guess maybe when Carl and Tammy started coaching, they used GoToWebinar, and they did have video, but I never did for some reason. I just started doing it maybe 5 years ago, maybe. And it's made a huge difference, because now instead of looking at a picture, I'm actually talking to people and I can recognize them when I see them. And it's the same way with a team. You feel like you know them because you've seen them, even if you don't see each other very often. The next question I have about your team is, when you first hired them, I know you've been through a lot over the years, different hiring, but now what advice would you have for loan officers? 2 pieces of advice. Number one, for the loan officer that can't or doesn't want to hire somebody with experience already, because they already have habits and things like that they don't want to have to redo. And the second one would be for the loan officer that does have experience. What advice would you give them on training each of those 2 people? Now, I know the first piece of advice is don't hire if they don't have experience. I know for sure, because that's what we teach.
Yeah. So there's 2 things, right? I mean, and I've hired people with no experience, and I think that it depends what you're hiring somebody for. So I love, and I actually have a person on my team. I did something that I swore I would never do. And I hired a family member. And I know you guys have family that you've worked with, and it's worked very well for you. Mm-hmm. I was very nervous about this. My sister-in-law had wanted to come and explore the possibility for several years, and I would not even have the conversation. I was just very fearful that if it did not work, that it was not going to end well. Mm-hmm. And this last year, I had somebody going on maternity leave, and I was like, okay, it was a loan officer assistant, somebody that would do, kind of file setup, get the documents in place, things like that, something that would be a lot easier to teach from the ground up. Uh-huh. And so I ended up taking the chance, and man, I'm kicking myself. I wish I'd have hired her for 5 years earlier. Uh-huh. So I do think that aptitude is super, super important. And I think that the more things you can do to flush out what somebody's aptitude is, and, as we do the evaluations, the DISC evaluations, and we use the 3 layers of that, which flushes a lot out, but it still doesn't tell you what somebody's aptitude is. Right. That's a personality kind of evaluation. And the aptitude is that, I think their ability to, number one, critically think, their ability to handle a lot of things at the same time. And we're in a fast-paced environment. And that's one of the challenges that I've had with people I've hired. We're in a broker world. We have to know a lot of different platforms from every different investor and all the technologies that we use. And that's been a point of challenge in the past. So I think that if you can hire experienced and they have that, and you can determine the aptitude, that's critical. And how do you determine the aptitude? I think you've got to find ways to test them. You have to, if it's a loan partner who's going to be doing qualifying and analyzing somebody, give them a really hard file that could potentially have multiple options for an outcome. Yes. And see how many they come up with. Mm-hmm. See if they have the ability to think, about, hey, could I have done this as if it's an investor, could it have been a debt service loan? Or maybe they've got a really great credit score and a ton of assets, but the income is really tight. Could they have done an asset loan? Could they, can they think critically and be able to go in multiple directions, not just the direction the client called up and asked for, and trying to fit that hole, right? And how do you do that? Is you give them something with a lot of possible outcomes, and see how what process they go through to draw their options, their conclusions, if you will. So that's one way that I've found can help you determine that. And one of the things that I love, I actually have a person that's new on my team that started last week. And when we interviewed her, the other thing that I've done is that I have learned that I do not leave the interview process up solely to myself. I bring other people in the organization. The reason I do that is because the truth is there's not really too many people I talk to that I don't love. And so, but loving them,
I know what you mean.
Yeah, loving them and them being the right fit for the job don't always go hand in hand, right?
Right.
So by having brought in some other people, they think of things, they ask some questions that I don't think of. And what I typically will do is I'll do the initial interview, sometimes one or two, and then I'll schedule an interview with the person with some of my salespeople. And I do not tell them anything about the interview that I did. They know nothing. As a matter of fact, I don't even share the resume with them. They go at it completely cold. And that's done intentionally. And then what I do is I just observe the interview process. I don't participate. I don't want to say I don't participate in it, but I don't lead it. I'll do some upfront introductions and I let them take it. And then what I have the ability to do as an observer is I see things I didn't see when I was the one running it.
Yes.
So that's been really, really powerful and helpful in me feeling like, we made way better decisions. And then we make a decision and it's everybody's in agreement or we don't move forward.
I like that. Everybody's in agreement or you don't move forward.
Yeah.
I think that's great. And having your support staff there too, other loan partners, if they're going to be a loan partner, are they going to get along with your people? I think there's ways to do that without making them feel intimidated during the process.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. Well, and I think too, I think that if you have the right personality, I don't know, I guess there could be environments that it could be intimidating, but I don't think I'm, when we're doing these things, I don't think we're look, I just had a friend that got a job at Amazon. She went through 12 interviews.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. So if you want to talk about intimidating, that's, and those interviews were not sitting around with a cup of coffee and having a conversation. These are really intensive personality, behavioral, all kinds of very, very deep evaluations. So, we talk about something being intimidating, but the truth is you're going to deal with a lot of different people. So if they can't handle the pressure of a couple people interviewing them, then they're probably not going to do well.
And that's good to know up front. It's better to know it up front than it is to know down the road.
Yeah, 100%. So I don't say never to the no experience. I wouldn't put somebody with no experience in a high level position.
No,
I would let them work their way into that. Yes. Now, I think that, Stacy, I think she will develop into a loan partner and I train her. I give her access to any training material that I give to anybody else in my organization. I am not going to hold her back. I want her. She has all of the ability inside of her. She just needs the knowledge. Yes. So the skills are there. If I can layer the knowledge on top of it, there is not a doubt in my mind, she will not only become a loan partner someday, but she will be a really good one.
Yes.
We will continue to develop her. And it's easier to sometimes, depending on the market, it's easier to fill that position than it is to fill somebody that's comes more, plug and play, if you will. But if I can hire plug and play, then, that's really qualified, then that's always going to be preferred.
Yes. Well, I'm really passionate about training. And the reason I'm passionate about it, well, I would have always been passionate anyway, but I'm especially passionate about it because I didn't get trained when I got into the mortgage business. I was promised training. I never received it. I was lost without it, didn't know what to do. And I ended up getting trained because I came into a brokerage and I ended up getting trained by the reps. There was a B paper rep and there was an A paper rep. And I will never forget the A paper rep and the B paper rep, both of them. But they taught me the mortgage business because anytime I had a question, I went to them. I should have been able to go to my broker. I should have been able to have a class. I should have been able to find some way to learn. I felt like I was grasping all the time. I was just going for it all the time, trying to ask questions, trying to do this. And it really worked, but it took way longer than if I had just taken a class. And so there are courses available to do now, but it's important that if they just don't know the mortgage business, there are classes that they can take to do that. I'm passionate about it. So tell us about your experience with training courses and classes.
Well, I'm like you. I came up through the same program. I've got the School of Hard Knocks and Go Get 'em Champ training program. And so I did the same thing you did. And I read guidelines, I pulled them out and I would learn them and I would work my way through them. And, the hard part about this business is, the training piece of it is until you have a real file that you can apply something to, it doesn't always click for people. But you have to start layering knowledge. And so the best way to do that is like you're talking in these external programs. And I do think there's tremendous value in the various investors, account executives, and the trainings that those programs offer. But I'm a huge fan. Number one, you do a great program with your WOW training and your conversion training.
Thank you.
Really, I've got somebody in my team, when he went through your WOW training, he had already been with me, I think, for at the time, 3 or 4 years. And he came back and all of a sudden took ownership over things that I could not get him to take ownership over. And so that was really valuable to me. And that's what I need all of my people to do, right? I need them to really take responsibility and understand that, look, in order for us to keep selling, you've got to handle this. You've got to really take charge of this. Don't keep coming to me. If you've got to keep coming to me, then you're disrupting my ability to keep selling, which gives us job security. So that was super, super valuable. So that program is incredibly valuable to me. I'm a huge fan of the National Association of Mortgage Processors, and I like the underwriting and the processing boot camps. Those are programs that I really love. A lot of people probably think I overkill it, but I don't think there's any such thing when it comes to training, because I think that the more knowledge you have, that you can then, again, you can just pivot faster, right?
I agree.
So, when it comes into, DU or LP, what are the rules of, can I do a 1-year tax return? Well, it's different for DU and LP, right? How do I learn that? Well, I have to know the guidelines. I have to, and I have to be paying attention, and I have to get exposed to this stuff, right? So going through as much of that, and I don't care whether you're a processor, a loan partner, a loan officer, or anything. I think if you can get opportunities to get underwriting training, then that's a grand slam, because if you can learn what the underwriter wants and how they think, then you can prepare and provide the right documentation from day one and prepare your clients accordingly, and it will just go smoother all the way down the road.
Yes. We just can't give it to them right at the beginning when they're newbies, because they don't really understand it yet. Yeah. But in processes, right? In steps is what I meant.
Yeah. Yes. It's layering, right? So you can't, everything you do is a compound effect.
Yes.
So you didn't get where you are today without having done all the years before today. So it's the same thing, and you just pick up right where you are. Now, we just did at the end of the year, I had everybody in my organization, originators, support staff, everybody self-evaluate on every program, every technology, and basically they had to self-rate them on everything.
I love that.
What we did is we're basically scheduling trainings so that I wanted to make sure, no matter where they were, if they felt like they needed help on a technology, and I have everybody in my organization that feels that they need help in that space, that it makes sense for us to do the training at one time. And so same thing from a product standpoint. I know some people are really proficient. I don't need to take them out of production to train them on something they're already proficient at. Right. So, but for all the people that need help in that space, I take them out at the same time. We bring in an account executive or a couple of them, depending on the product lines and stuff, and we commit the training time. So we're trying to be very intentional about helping them layer their knowledge, get more understanding. So again, and it's funny because they went through a training last week with one of my investors. The investor sent out an updated kind of an overview. It was a non-QM investor. I was reviewing it yesterday, and I was like, you know what? I have a file I'm working on right now. I didn't know that they did this. Right. So you're just, again, layering, right? So you're layering that knowledge, and then that gets stored in the memory bank. And the next time something hits your head, you're like, oh, I know that there's somebody out there that does this. How do I go, where do I go to find out? How do I search this out? And how do I get this done? So that's what we're doing. And I think it just, but I can't do one training, right? It's one training doesn't mean you're going to be proficient at it.
No.
So depending on where each of them are on their knowledge, that one training is their layer at that time in their career. The next training will layer on top of that, and so on and so forth. So, some of them will get to proficiency faster than others.
And it's never too late to train someone on something. Like, we have people that come through our loan assistant mortgage training boot camp, which is an online self-paced course, and it teaches them about loans from A to Z, 1003, how to get documentation, everything from A to Z. And what it does is it helps people, even if they are not brand new, even if they've been in the business a year, sometimes 2 years. We've had people go in it that have been in the business a year or two, and they just never got formally trained. Yeah. So they don't really know all the ins and outs of things, but it's like giving them the base of everything that they've needed. That, oh, I didn't realize that. Oh, I didn't realize. It's just nice to be formally trained in not just how to do loans, but how to actually be a great team member, how to have great self-talk, because we always talk about that in every one of our trainings, how to have great self-talk, how to be a great team member, how to just be really, really great at dealing with clients and supporting the loan officer and those types of things. And so I think it's really important that no matter how much training they've had or how much experience that they've had, there's still something they can be trained in. And so I love that you're doing that with your team, that you're making sure that this layer, okay, they've learned this. Now let's put them on this one. Let's teach this class. And it's never too late to learn.
No, something that I had forgotten about, I had done this, I don't even know, probably 10, 13 years ago. There's a program called Situational Leadership. It's a coaching program that's out there.
Okay.
And I had gone through the program to become certified in it. Like I said, 10 or 13 years ago, it's been a while. And I don't know what, I was going through something. I was just wrestling with something and I was like, how can I figure this out? Like how can, and I thought, what situational leadership taught us was that the people that you're working around will give you cues of what the problem is. And so sometimes you can think the cues mean one thing, but if you step back, more often than not, they will lead to something else, right? They're the symptom. They're not the real problem. Mm-hmm. Here's one that I find very common. When you find a team member that's having trouble moving efficiently through qualifying things, mm-hmm. very often it's because they have an insecurity about some products. So it's not that they don't want to, it's not that they don't, it has nothing to do with that. They could have the biggest heart, they could have the biggest desire to please everybody involved, but there's some insecurity about their knowledge. And so they get paralyzed in that space. Mm. So having the ability to identify, and then, hopefully they're comfortable enough to be able to communicate where they need to be developed so that you can then bring them the information. Right. Mm-hmm. But look for those cues. If somebody in your team is showing resistance or is showing, then what is the real problem? Is it really resistance, or is resistance the symptom of something else going on?
Mm-hmm. That's a great takeaway.
Yeah. So I think that, I'm trying to be more aware of that, because I think that, we get caught up, we get busy, right? And we're just going through things and we forget to take those pauses sometimes, mm-hmm. and pay attention and, really kind of lean into and go, okay, what else could this mean?
Yes.
Like this person's working really hard. Everything else that they do tells me that they want to do the right things and they want to perform at a high level. So what else could this possibly mean? Mm-hmm. And what I just find a lot of times, it's that they just need the training. They need more knowledge. They need some information, because, and the funny part is if we give it to them many, many times, because they already have a lot of information, maybe this is just a new space for them, they'll close the gap really fast.
They do. They really do. We've had people, we just started a training class this week, and we had a couple of the loan officers reach out to us and go, oh my gosh, it is so amazing what they're doing just in one day, in 2 days. They're taking ownership. They're talking to people differently. They're realizing all the things that I've been trying to show them, and with the very minimal amount of time they're spending doing it, right? Because loan officers are supposed to go out and get business. They're not supposed to be in the office training the staff. And so you think as a loan officer that you've told them all the things, but it's all in one training course, and it makes a big difference. So it's an honor to be able to train people. It's an honor not only to coach people, but to actually train their teams. It's amazing. It's opened up a whole new world that I'm just really grateful for, because in training the team, I've been able to train or help the loan officer. So that was the thing, is my clients are loan officers basically, or branch managers or company owners. And so if it helps the loan officer, I'm excited. I'm happy, because that's what you need.
I get super excited when they have a thirst, right?
Yes.
When they really are like, okay, I can do this better. What do I have to do? Like when they're really on the hunt and they're like, I want to be really good at what I do, then that gets me, like, I'll help anybody go to the end of the earth if they're on their own mission to be better themselves.
Yes. Yep. Well, I just love it. And I appreciate you, Toni, because you were one of the first ones that said, hey, I'm sending them to your training. I don't know what it is yet, but if you're doing it, I can do it.
No, you guys are awesome. I mean, look, we continue every time we bring somebody in. It's just part of our program now. It just makes sense. And, people think like, the people that might be listening to this, and, we're all trying to be smart, right? And the last year of the market's been a little bit different. And so we get caught up sometimes in thinking about money. And, the truth is your time is incredibly valuable. And it's very difficult when you're running your business and doing the things that you're doing and trying to make things come in the door. And if you can give your employee the space to go be intentional and be focused on developing, they will get way more out of it. And you will be able to actually continue to sell, which will more than pay for itself. And it will just, it's going to accelerate you so much faster. I think that when I think back about my career, the times that I didn't think I could afford to do something along these lines, it cost me 10 times as much as what the upfront cost was because of the slowdown in their ability to ramp up, my time spent trying to develop them. And many times my frustration, their frustration, right? Because they're not getting where they want to go.
Right.
Does it jeopardize a relationship because the people on the other end of the phone know that they're not getting, they can feel it. Right. And that's another piece of it, right? The confidence that somebody gets when they do know.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the big distinctions of when you have somebody that does have this knowledge. It's not, you're not a better salesperson. It's just that you have a level of confidence that when you talk to somebody gives them peace of mind.
Yes.
So the more knowledge you can give somebody on your team, the more they will talk more confidently, which will parlay into more conversions, which again trickles down.
Yeah, it sure does. Well, thank you so much for being here today. And what last piece of little tip do you have for loan officers to give us today?
Gosh, you know what? You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Be very, very consistent of making sure that you're having really quality conversations. If you can just simply make sure that you are very intentional about that on a daily basis and, set whatever your standard is. I know my goal is 13 quality conversations a day. Keep calling until you get it done. And just, yesterday's over with. You're not getting it back. So just let go of it. Start today, start fresh, do everything you can, and just be consistent. The reward is in the consistency.
Yes, I agree. Well, thank you so much, Toni, for being here today. And for all of you, I appreciate you listening to our podcast. And if you benefited from what we talked about today, please share it with some other loan officers that might get some value out of it. And what would really help us out is a 5-star review, because the more of those that we have on the podcast, the more people will see the podcast. And so I've only had a handful of podcasts so far. We just started a few months ago and it's been really, really fun. But if you could share it, we really appreciate it. And also, if you know anyone that's looking for training, any loan officers or companies or branch managers that are looking to train their staff, we would really appreciate you checking out our website at loanteamtraining.com. So thank you again, Toni, and have a wonderful week.
Thank you.